All right. So we've done our intro at this point, and we're now going to dive into some PowerShell 101. So show of hands, how many in the room have used PowerShell? Most of us. And then not, right? Okay. Or maybe a little, you've dabbled, right? But not a whole lot. All right. So one of the things I want to point out is there are different versions of PowerShell and so on, but what is PowerShell? The way that I think about PowerShell is it is a similar to your DOS command prompt. Right there, some people would slap me, but it's similar to the DOS command prompt. It's like your DOS command prompt on steroids. You have a console, a terminal that you type commands into, and something happens. Right? So if I were to open up CMD, my command prompt, this is the familiar, thing that I might have. And apologies if that's somewhat small. How big do we want to go? Maybe like one of those? A little bit better. But what do we want to do? We could do a dir. Show me the contents of the current directory. Okay. ls. Not recognized.
Oh, who you in DOS?
I'm on a Windows machine, right? That's a Linux command or a Unix command. So cls is clear screen. Okay. I could do mkdir, make a directory, delete me. And I just created a new folder in that directory, right? Now if I do a dir, I have in there a new folder called delete me. So you can do some things with the command prompt. This all leads to scripting, right? Let's say I want to create a new folder, structure. Forget about files and forget about content. What if I know that I've got 3,000 pictures and I already did my taxonomy and I want to organize all my pictures in this particular folder structure? Well, if I know what that is, I could potentially run a script, a batch file, a .bat file, that just has commands in it, to execute those commands one at a time, line by line, sequentially, to build that out for me.
It's also called a configuration and automation, right, I believe. And what I see with PowerShell, so think of your desktop, everyone has their computer.
Well, now, Chris, you're speaking today, so I'm going to ask you to hold off, and
Yes, sir.
you can dive into that when you go.
Yep.
And I do want to be cognizant of time today as well.
Thank you.
So this is a command prompt. You can do things. You can do things with PowerShell. Let me close this out, and I'm just going to hit my Windows key, and here I am. And what do I want to type PowerShell? One word, PowerShell. And we'll see a few things. Okay, we've got the PowerShell ISE. ISE is the Integrated Scripting Environment. It's a little bit more dynamic. It allows you to write scripts. It allows you to write PowerShell commands and selectively run them on demand in the terminal to see what they do and how they behave. So if you know what you want to do, but you're not sure what the PowerShell script is to make it happen, and you're going to write it, the ISE is a good option because you can write the script, run one command, see what it did, and decide, yes, I want to keep that in my script, or no, I don't. Okay? Now, you also have, forgive me, new mouse, so it's a little different. You have Windows PowerShell. This is your PowerShell terminal, console, where you just type commands and things happen. So let's take a look first at PowerShell terminal or console. It happens to be blue by default, so that's a good indication of where you're at. And let me increase the font. Might look pretty horrible, but we'll go with it. Okay, better. I'm in my terminal now, so it looks very similar. But you'll notice a couple things. First thing to notice is the icon in the title bar is different, and your terminal lines all start with PS or PowerShell. And what can I do? Well, dir, DLS. The terminal's off the screen, so we can't see everything right now. I'll see if I can adjust this. to cooperate a little bit better. dir
Tree sequence.
plus, what's that?
Tree sequence.
I don't know these commands you're throwing at me. I'm going to hold on. Well, let's say we've got IP config. That's a common one. What's my IP address? What are my network things? You know, so these are, I'm in PowerShell, but I can do the same commands in PowerShell that I could in my normal command prompt, but I can do so much more. Okay? One thing to be aware of, and let me I'll bring up code for this. Just I want to lay some terminology down. Close that folder. I just want a new file. Okay. It's slow. All right. Yeah, see that okay? Maybe brighten it, change the theme. I always forget to do this before I start the movies. A little bit better. I'll update later. All right, so I want to talk about commands, okay? In the command prompt, the things that you would type out were called commands. Okay? Pretty straightforward. The prompt. It's prompting you for a command. You give it a command, it executes the command, and it says, give me the next one. Ready to go. In the PowerShell terminal console, you type commandlets. They're called CMDlets, commandlets. Okay? What are commandlets? You can think of commandlets as full functions, complete operations. It can do one activity like create a folder or add a new file, or you could create a commandlet that does all sorts of things and calls other commandlets and really wreaks havoc in the world, or does good things. Okay, but what I want to point out for now is that a commandlet has a particular format: verb-noun. Okay, every command in PowerShell is a verb-noun. What does that mean? Why is that important? It's really not, unless you start writing your own, because you probably want to follow that guideline. Okay? And it also helps. What are common operations when we write code? Anyone know the 4 basic operations? There's that acronym, kind of dirty. CRUD, create, read, update, delete. Right? PowerShell has some similar ones. To create, we have add. To read, we have get. I believe we have update, and then instead of delete, we have remove. Okay? What you can do is you can certainly write your own PowerShell commandlets and modules and functions and all that good stuff, and we'll talk about what each of these things are to some degree. Firefox needs to update suddenly.
These notes you're taking, will you send that out to the group?
I can send this out to the group, sure. Save it on the desktop. And send to the group. Otherwise, I'll be like, what was this for?
So you are in Visual Studio now?
I'm in Visual Studio Code, which is these days a pretty important distinction. But if you jump out online, go to your favorite search engine. I've got Bing integrated here. You can go to PowerShell approved verbs. You know, we have organizations in the world that decide, and this is the way it's going to be, like the IEEE and FCC and all those. Somewhere there's a PowerShell group who said these verbs are the approved ones. So there's an MSDN article on it. Okay, verb naming rules, common verbs. Okay, you can flow through here and actually find the list of approved, accepted, common verbs. So I wrote a few modules for Fuse, because we deliver Fuse with PowerShell. And at first I was like, I started them all off with the name fuse dash create site, fuse dash whatever. But fuse isn't the verb, right? It should have been add dash fuse site or create dash fuse site. So it's important to kind of be aware of that, follow that pattern where appropriate. Another thing that it's important to be aware of is we have aliases. This can make your life easy or more likely make it very confusing. Okay? Let's run get process. I'm in my Windows PowerShell console. I can get all the processes running on my machine by typing get-process. And it's going to run through and give me that data output.
So speaking that running through, I assume there's something you can do to not have it just all flow by.
Yeah, obviously I wasn't able to see all that, right? So there's a few things we can do. We can do get process, and a very important part of PowerShell that you're going to love and you need to remember and get used to is tab complete state. I want to get something, what was it? Tab, don't make me a liar. There we go. No, I don't want to get a package provider. Hang on. Or a source or anything like this. Partition, wasn't it like something? Process, that's what it was.
How are you?
You hit tab.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Tab completion, hit tab. So, but now I want to get process, but I want to see them going through. So you can use a pipe character, which is that fun little key right above your enter key. Basically shift backslash will throw the pipe character up there. And then just type more. If you remember from your command prompt days before PowerShell, all that output, you would type pipe more. Same thing here, pipe more, and it'll give me a page at a time, and I can hit enter to go line by line, or hit that space bar to go to the next page. Now, let's say I want to get the processes on 30 machines on my network, and I'll put that data to a CSV file so I can look over and analyze it. I don't know why you would do that, but I'm sure there's somebody out there who has. So we have other ways to view this data to make it meaningful. We can get process and actually pipe that to another commandlet. So piping, think about literally standing on the third floor of your house, and you want to send someone to somebody on the first floor, and there's a big tube. You drop it in the tube, it goes to that next person, right? You piped it. That's the way I think of it, is you're sending the output of one command through a pipe to the other. So we're going to do a get process export CSV. And export CSV has parameters on it. So commandlets have parameters. So if I don't remember what these parameters are though, but this is where tab completion comes in handy. I hit space and then a hyphen and start hitting tab. It starts telling me what the available parameters are. So I want to export a CSV, and the path I'm going to say is $home. I'll explain that in a moment. Desktop, and let's call all processes.csv. Waiting for the terminal to come back to me if something's happening. This is where output comes in handy. You're waiting and you're not sure what's going on. You did something on accident. You can build outputs into your functions and PowerShell scripts. Okay, that took a lot longer than it should have, but if I go out to my desktop, here's all processes.csv. Open that up. And there's a lot of data in here. This can be used for troubleshooting, for who knows what. But there's a lot of data now out here in this CSV. I can save it as an Excel file now and build charts off it if I want to. Because you can't build charts off of CSV, but this is data in Excel. Save it as Excel, build a chart. Let's say you want to find out how many users are in your Office 365 tenant are licensed versus unlicensed, are blocked versus unblocked. And you want to put this stuff in a chart, or you want to get a listing of all the sites and the storage they've been using over time. You can over time build all that data into into an Excel file like I did here, and then build charts from it in Excel. So there can be some really useful applications here for this kind of stuff. And yes, it is all based on permissions and the ability to do this, but I am on my Surface. It's a Windows 10 machine. Windows 10 machines come with PowerShell. I think PowerShell 5 now. I could be wrong on that. But it's available. And so my machine, I'm an admin locally, I can run PowerShell. One thing that's hung me up several times in my career is the execution policy on the machine I'm working on. So it's important. You can't just log into a server and run PowerShell. Okay? There's a commandlet, get execution policy. What is the policy for running PowerShell scripts on this machine? This one's bypass. I forget what that means offhand. But commandlets also have a fun little feature for help. So I'm going to say get execution policy dash to help. Oh, sorry. I'm working backwards. There's a commandlet called get help, and I want to get help with the get execution policy commandlet. And if I scroll down or up, it just says, it gives me the syntax, how to run it, and some aliases, which in this case has none. Okay. Now, let's say I wanted to kill a process. I wanted to stop a process running on this machine. Okay. There is a commandlet called stop process. First, I want to know what process I want to stop. So, give me the process. I guess I can look at my Excel spreadsheet here. And there's a process. Probably don't want to close down Explorer or code. Let's open up Internet Explorer. That's one we always want to kill. Don't tell anybody. So what's the name of the process that runs Internet Explorer? iExplorer, thank you. So, in my PowerShell terminal, if I said, give me the process iExplorer, oh, there's two of them there. And it gives me the handles, it gives me the ID, 8808 and 12940. So now I can say stop process. And what's the parameter on stop process? You can't just stop all your processes, right? You're going to want to pass in some parameter, the name or the ID. So in this case, as I use my tab completion, I'm able to go through and see all the parameters available. So we'll do ID 8808, the first one in my list of processes. And it looked like that worked because Internet Explorer just closed. Now if I do, you can use the up arrow to go up to the previous commands you just ran. So if I say, give me all the iExplorer processes again, can't find it. Red text in PowerShell means something's wrong or something. So it can't find it. Okay, so let's do this. Let's start up Internet Explorer again. It didn't close that unexpectedly. I did it. Say it again? Why didn't the 12940 show up? I don't know. So for some reason, my Internet Explorer, when it pops up, it kicks off two processes. Maybe it's doing some threading. Maybe I have a virus. I don't know. I really don't know. But there's my two again. So I fired up one instance of Internet Explorer, but I have two processes that support it for some reason. Now, here's my explanation of an alias. Exactly what you think it is. Instead of typing stop process, you can type kill, which other platforms are more familiar with. Linux folks kill things all the time, if I'm correct. So I'm going to say kill, and then same parameters. It's literally an alias. Kill is a PowerShell commandlet, but it's the alias of stop process. So we're going to say, I want to kill 12148. Internet Explorer just died. I have no iExplore processes running right now. So that kind of makes sense. Stop process, kill. Okay, different OSs. We know what that means. Here's something that will blow your mind. There is a commandlet called for each object. Okay? I'm going to do something. I have hundreds of processes in a variable. For each process, I want to do something. Get alias is a command for each. Let's see. How do I use get alias? I want to get help with get alias. So I say get alias name string. So let's try to get alias name for each object. That didn't do what I wanted to do. This is actually trying to get the alias. So if I did a get alias kill, it's going to say, hey, kill is the alias of stop process. Okay? But instead of typing, let's say I have a long script with hundreds of lines of PowerShell, and someone has a for each object in there. Okay? I can read that, I understand that. Let me put this in the notes here. For each object is, any guesses? Percent. A percentage sign. You can literally have a script that says all things equals get all things, and then you can say for each object, and then in parentheses you'd say thing in all things, do something. Okay? But instead of doing that, somebody gives the alias. Okay? My thought here, my suggestion is do not use aliases. Unless you're trying to write code that's incredibly hard for other people to understand, which you may want to do. And I support that, if there's a valid reason for it. But I'll tell you what, you guys are getting ideas. I see that. Because you can create your own aliases for your own things. They're the default ones, but you could have an alias called Moon that does something no one understands. You want to be careful about that. I stay away from aliases as my own for that reason. Okay? Now, where aliases come in handy is if you're in the console, if you're in the terminal, and you're doing something real quick. Instead of typing get child item to list all the items in the current directory, you can type dir. dir is an alias of get child item. I believe you can also type GCI. It's an alias. So as an admin, as I'm doing things that are temporary and are not going to be repeated a lot in my current session, aliases are a blast. But when I write my PowerShell scripts that I have 30 other people working with me on or whatever, we don't want to use aliases. It's going to be problematic. Okay? Some other things, let me show you the PowerShell ISE so you can get an idea of what that's for. So I'll go here, PowerShell. We'll fire up the ISE, Integrated Script Environment, Integrated Scripting Environment. And you have a variety of ways you can lay this out. There's some options here in the toolbar, but you basically have at the top a PS1 file. That's your script file. PowerShell files are PS1 files. And then down here at the bottom, you have a version of that console. So when you type something in the bottom and hit enter, it happens. When you type something in the top and hit enter, it hasn't happened yet. You're building the script in the top while testing in the bottom. So let's say, I don't know can I zoom in on this? Oh, a little bit. That's cool. Let's say I don't know offhand how to get all my processes and put them into a CSV file, and I want to build that script. So I can actually just have a script in my file on my desktop that I double click that does that for me. So I know there's a command called get process. I think that's the first thing I want to have in my, notice the IntelliSense coming up. Get process is the first thing I want to have in my command, in my script. And then I know I want to export to a CSV, and I think that was export CSV. Okay, so I know I want to get my processes and put them in a CSV. So if I run this script up here, so there's a little run button, you'd have 5, it'll run everything in the top, it runs it in the bottom and gives you the output. So if I run it, there's all my processes. Oh, so now I'm being prompted for something called input object. Oh, that's right, my export CSV file, I got to tell it what file to put things in, right? So let's put it at C:delete me. And there's some issue there. Not a good idea to do anyway. Oh, I didn't put in the path parameter and then the path. So, okay, so now I'm learning some things as I go. And you know what? It'd be really nice if I could look at an example of using that export CSV commandlet first. So I'm going to do a get help with that export CSV commandlet, and I'm going to put a dash examples parameter on there. Give me examples of doing this. I'll put this in here as well. And so let's run that. And it gives me the output down here. I have to actually did not give me examples. Not give me examples. Notice the alias on there, EPCSV. Oh, okay, so that's the thing is get help in PowerShell needs to be updated sometimes. That's why I'm not seeing all the examples. So let me just skip past this, and we're going to say we want to get export to CSV, and the path is going to be home, desktop, or processes, a CSV. Home is a variable. Okay, if I want to know what home means, I can just go to the terminal and type home. Home is your user directory path. C:user/your username. It's a good place to put things when you're working. It's in your directory on your desktop or downloads or whatever. So when I have my other people in Catapult running scripts, part of the script process is, hey, since you ran that, grab the log file off the desktop, put it over here, so I'll be notified and I can review it and make sure things went well. All right, so get process, but now I would want to take get process and actually pipe that to that other command. One line. Now if I hit F5, it's getting all the processes, storing them in memory, then piping them to the export CSV like we did before, and we're going to have a file that lands on that desktop here in a moment once the terminal comes back to me.
So if you don't do the pipe, it'll show it on screen and also export it?
If you don't do the pipe and you've got it on one line, it's going to throw an error.
On multiple, like you had it.
If it's on multiple lines, the two things are not connected.
They will up.
Right. I should say they can be on multiple lines, but they have to be piped.
Yeah.
And there's actually a character. If I ran this, to get process pipe to nothing effect. Well, maybe it's going to just know what I mean here and work. But typically, if you want to continue a line, you use a backtick character. in PowerShell. That way you can organize things to make them look nice and format them in blocks and things, but the backtick is the continuation of the line. Let me hit stop here. It's already done. Oh, somebody else joined it. Welcome, buddy. All right. So that is another example of some things you can do with PowerShell. This is PowerShell. I mean, this is the basics. You've got commandlets, verb-noun. There are many of them. The other thing to be aware of is if you're working on a Microsoft product, if you're an admin, you're going to manage and maintain that with script using PowerShell. If you're a developer, there's a PowerShell API for you to tap into. If you're an admin running PowerShell, you're kind of a developer, even though you may not want to admit it, because the code, those commandlets behind them is precompiled C# code that Microsoft wrote. You're running code against those servers, against those machines, against those environments. If you're a developer running PowerShell, you're kind of an IT admin. There's a little bit of an overlap there. It's pretty interesting where we're at with this kind of stuff. But if you work with Microsoft Exchange, there's an Exchange module that you have to load. Just because I have PowerShell on my machine does not mean I can manage Exchange or SharePoint. No. Different products have different modules. There is PowerShell for Windows, which is what I have here because this is PowerShell for Windows. Okay? But it's not PowerShell for SharePoint. I can't type in here connect SPO service, which is the commandlet to connect to SharePoint Online. If I try to run that command, which, by the way, this ISE is nice because you can have all sorts of PowerShell unorganized, and you can run one line at a time. Instead of executing the whole file, run this selection, F8. And what it's telling me down here is, I don't know what Connect SPO service is. Okay? So I'll show you a trick. You can install the SharePoint Online Management Shell. I happen to have a pretty handy way of doing it. This is a module I wrote called Import SharePoint References that allows me to run any SharePoint scripts on any Windows machine without installing anything else. All I gotta do is have this set of files on my machine. So now I'm going to say I want to import a module. It's a commandlet. And the path to that module is that file. And now that I've loaded that module, I can use my commandlet to import my SharePoint references for SharePoint Online. Now I connect. Now I can run my commandlets for, I use P&P, patterns and practices. You can do the SPO stuff if you have the SharePoint Online management stuff down here, which I leave off commonly because P&P is more robust. But now I can connect to P&P. I can log in and automate and do my thing. Okay?
Is that party and plan?
Party and plug and play, patterns and practices. Could be anything. Wherever you want to go with that. But I'm going to go ahead and stop here. Does anyone have any quick questions on PowerShell? Chris is going to go into some more detail, but like basic stuff.
When you write a script, you have a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
How do you separate? Do you have separate themes?
Oh, that's a great question. If you're going to write a script and there's a lot of stuff in it, how do you organize it, separate things, and so on? So I'll show you an example. This is my daily life, folks. I have a script. It's a PS1 file, so it's literally a script. And luckily we have code folding now in Visual Studio Code, so it makes our life a little bit easier to manage. Once code is done doing what it's doing, loading. We've got parameters, variables, a main region. You can put regions in here like C#, so you have your hashtag region, hashtag end region sections. But this is the main script for what I do that actually just runs a bunch of stuff. So there are actually no functions in here. Most of these line items are calls to other functions, calls to other modules. If we look at the modules, which I do have some modules I include in here. This is if I want to add a page to Fuse. There's a function called add Fuse page, and that function can take in parameters. What are things you want to know when you're adding a page to a site? What's the name of the page? What's the URL of the page? Do you want to add web parts to the page? Because we could do that in this file too. What do you want to do? You can do this kind of stuff. So, let's see, do I have another good one here? This is a function that uploads a bunch of files to SharePoint. But that's kind of the gist of it. The same things you would do in like a C# kind of an environment, and now JavaScript, like C#, PowerShell, JavaScript are all very close to each other nowadays. So you can take one and learn the others pretty quickly if you can get through the syntactical differences. But yeah, you would use functions, and so.
But you've got an if in there, but the if is PowerShell? PowerShell?
Right here? Yeah. PowerShell understands if. So now the question is that an alias? No. If is not an alias. So not everything in PowerShell is a commandlet, right? A commandlet is something you want to run when you want to take an action to do something. But there are also conditional words, like operators. Thank you. Comparison operators, greater than, less than, equal to. And actually, so that's real quick. One thing I want to point out. This will drive you nuts. You're not nuts already. So let's say you want to say, I'm going to say $, my number, and you want to assign to that 1. Equals is assignment. We're okay with that, right? Let's grab that. Drop it in here. Now I can just type the name of that variable, and I get 1. Let's say I want to say, is the contents of that variable equal to 1? You might be wanting to say, if my number equals 1, and then do something. Typically, we would say something like write host, yes. Write host is your commandlet output. Now, if I take that, run it, it works. Okay? But what if we're dealing with strings and phrases and things like that? The equal sign doesn't always help. Your comparison operators in PowerShell, okay, are things like -EQ, -and, -or, -not. So instead of in that equal sign, I might say -EQ. If my number equals 1, if the contents does equal 1, and it actually does that comparison. So some of the syntax here is a little bizarre and it'll throw you off at first, but I mean, all this basic stuff is online like crazy. You say, how do I compare things in PowerShell? PowerShell comparison, it'll tell you. PowerShell, create folders, files, what have you. There's tons of stuff out there, and some good books too. Okay. Anything else real quick, last minute, before we transition to Chris? So you have 2.0 on your computer, and you're being told to upgrade it? I mean, I would 5.0 for 5 versus 5.1. I'm sure there it is. I don't know what the details of that are. But again, if you were to do a search for PowerShell 5.1, like release notes or something, it might tell you the difference between 5.0 and 5.1. And then, those minor versions, they might be, quote, less stable than the major versions, like the .0. I don't know if that's true, but, I'd say you at least want to be on 5.0. I think that's the default one that comes with most of the newer Windows 10 machines, the ones that are fully updated. And I think PowerShell should be updated through Windows updates. Anyone know that offhand? It may not be. You may actually have to go out and download and install it, but surprised it's 2.0. I don't know how long ago that was. Things move so fast, I don't even know how long ago that was. Let me stop this recording here.